Welcome to What's My Thesis. I'm your host, Javier Proenza. Every week, my guests and I share the answers we found on the questions we have. Join us as we explore and expand our worldview and ask, What's my thesis? And today, my guest is Victor Castaneda. Castaneda.
Castaneda.
Castaneda. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's fine.
I started thinking that it sounded a lot like, what's his name? The guy that wrote Tales of Power. The Don Juan guy. I don't know if you know. He's like he became a guru, but he did like a bunch of like
No, I don't.
it's this guy. All right, so it's this book. It's these series of books, and I was into them because it's all about brujeria,
Mm,
and it's like posed as very like it's like presented kind of research papery. But then
yeah,
my mom told me, and I read a bunch of them. And it's really just about people taking fucking drugs and trying to like handle their trip,
yeah.
essentially, like in this weird way.
Is
But
it
what's
is it
that?
the Four Winds or the guy who wrote the Four Winds or something like
It
that?
might be. It sounds like he wrote Tales of Power. He wrote. I've heard of him basically through Deepak Chopra, and,
Okay.
like when I was like a kid, and then it was all really interesting stuff. And like I'm into all that like brujeria shit. Like it's all weird, and I'm into it. But and it's written like it's riveting like writing. But my mom told me that he ended up becoming a guru, and that gets kind of weird.
Yeah. A cult in its own making.
Yeah, which is one of the things. But anyway, sorry for mispronouncing your name.
No way.
But are you in LA?
No, I'm right now in San Diego. I'm doing my MFA at UCSD.
Hmm.
But originally I'm from like the LA area.
Is
I
that
grew up
the Rioski? What's the school called? In
uh, University California of San Diego.
Oh, okay. I'm confusing it with the USC's program. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that your program's pretty good. I'm confusing it because that's one of the places that I looked at.
Okay. Yeah, and I kind of grew up in the San Fernando Valley, so it's just kind of like a straight shot down here,
Cool.
it's not that far.
So you would you consider San Fernando Valley? You said not San Gabriel. So you're
Yes.
more. So which one's where's Burbank? San Fernando or San Gabriel?
Yeah.
Burbank is
Um,
San Gabriel, right?
no, Burbank is up north, like from close to the San Fernando Valley, like
Okay.
over the hill of like the LA area, where everyone just kind of like
Just
ignores everyone.
okay, just north of LA.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, okay, okay. Now I have a pretty good idea. And
Mm.
then San Gabriel, is that where the 405 takes you?
I don't know where San Gabriel is. I'm
Okay.
really bad at my maps.
Anyway, this makes riveting podcasting for anyone listening. Cool, man. And so, what media are you working with lately? Because I've been seeing you're doing some like digital stuff. Is
Yeah.
that okay?
Yeah, like primarily do sculpture, but I also do VR. That's kind of like the digital medium that I'm kind of like headed and with like in that aspect of digital artwork is VR that I'm kind of focused on and I'm also and then I do like sculptures out of paper mache. So those are
Oh,
like the
cool.
things that I kind of like work on the most.
What kind of are you doing representational work with your sculpture? What are we talking about? So people
Yeah,
can picture it.
they're representational right now. I'm currently working on a series of like working with toys out of memory and kind of like creating these like wall sculptural pieces that are kind of um like I'm thinking about like notepad papers, like you write your notes and stuff and kind of like bringing that out.
Hmm.
But I'm using like house paint and just kind of like everyday materials that you could find somewhere and not necessarily concerned with like using like acrylics or anything like that. Just like something that is fast and cheap and I could easily use.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, do you find that you end up saving money that way or not? But because I sometimes it's debatable when I use like fucking drywall
I
to
mean,
make like a super heavy fucking sculpture that that is completely useless, but like I need to make it. But yeah, I mean paper mache is cool as a material.
yeah. I mean, I feel like I could make a lot of sculptures with like because I just use like chicken wire under the as the skeleton and then cover that.
Mhm.
And I just buy like a big roll of paper and like Elmer's glue and just use that as just kind of like, just going really down to basic arts and crafts, but
Mhm.
just making it at a bigger scale.
Like how big of a scale are we talking?
They're pretty much a, almost my size, which
Okay.
I'm like 5'4", so they're like kind of like that high. I for some reason like everyone always points out it's like, oh yeah, these sculptures are always like your size. They're never anything bigger or anything less, but they're always like around my size. I'm like, yeah, I just don't want to use a ladder.
I was already assigning dumber, like more profound reasons for that. Oh, it's to your scale, but I love that it's just like, yeah.
Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah, that's like what I kind of like work at right now.
Yeah. That's interesting. Well, it kind of makes me think of, how like the stuff in like the propaganda buildings in like the Pantheon and stuff like that, like the Roman buildings, right? They're built with the golden ratio, but it's like to scale to the average man. Like I like the idea of you making a world that's just entirely to like getting accustomed to your size, right?
Yeah. And I feel like that's what I'm also working with VR, like
Mhm.
as well, like because like in VR, I'm still thinking of it as a sculptural, three-dimensional, or and like digital world as well, because you need to have like a headset and kind of like walk around in the space that it's put in. And like that is also like the objects are still kind of scaled to my size. Like
Okay.
they're never really scaled. I mean, sometimes they're scaled bigger, but right now I'm just kind of like focusing on like my size. And it's always weird when people are like, why is this person so small? Or like, why are they always kind of like the same height? And I'm just like, I just don't want to make it bigger than me.
Is there anything more behind that choice? Because in that case, I don't imagine that you're limited by ladders. In that
No,
case, no.
I mean, in VR or in just in general, it's just I'm more interested in creating a fantasy.
Hmm.
And then I don't know, I'm just thinking of like having everything just be the same, kind of in a way. And I'm not really thinking much more besides just my height in relation to it and that. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm answering your question right now.
Well, I mean, it's fair if there isn't really necessarily a specific answer with that I'm looking for. Like that happens a lot on the show where it's like, you know, there's plenty of questions that I ask that I can't get an answer to. Even if someone's like researched something and I'm like, wait, and then they're like, I don't know,
Yeah.
because it's not what. But that's a perfect example of it's not like what's interesting to them about it, right? So I guess that's what I'm figuring it out. But it is an interesting thing that it is a specific that you're attached to. Um, so, did you want to maybe like introduce your topic? Do you have a topic that you have wanted to talk about today?
Yeah. I mean, I think one topic that I'm kind of interested in is the like rave culture. Um,
Okay.
and kind of like, because I kind of participated in it for a little bit, and it's something that like I've done some research. I'm not like well knowledgeable on the whole history, like,
Hmm.
but somewhat like I've done a little bit of like research on that I kind of starting with. So I feel like that's the topic that I feel most comfortable talking
That's
about.
great. Well, first of all, do you know that I at one point did identify as a raver?
Oh, okay. So this
Were you
is
aware
gonna
of
be
this?
good.
I'm
Oh,
like all I anybody who's watched while you've been talking, I've been like all like oh polishing myself off. I'm actually wearing an Adidas hoodie.
yeah.
uh what's it called? Yeah, so what first question that I have is like what generation like are you? I'm from 1980, so I'm guessing we might have either the same. I can't gauge how old you are. But since just because you're in your MFA, I'm guessing you're probably younger than me. What year were you born?
I was born in '84.
84. Okay, so you are closer to my age.
Yeah.
I was like immediately like fucking regretting saying that because I was like, oh man, I aged him up if he's like 20 something. But like, yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, like I kind of did like um we and my friends kind of did like the raving from like 2007 until like 2010, 2011, somewhere around
Mhm.
there. So that was like the kind of like generation that I kind of was part of it. It was like at that point where EDM took over for like that last part of that decade and the early part of the 2010s where it was just everywhere.
So actually didn't know that EDM was. I thought EDM was just what they started calling techno,
Yeah,
but
that
it's actually its own genre, right? Like
yeah, it's
its
its own
own.
genre.
Yeah.
And it's weird, like, cause I always get confused with it too. I'm like, what makes EDM and what doesn't make EDM? But EDM is just pretty much what the latest evolution of techno, if I am correctly remembering.
Well, I think there's still techno. I think techno's still a thing, and all of that. But I mean, I think it's fair. I like a lot of stuff. It's hard to sort of. It's so niche and like I remember there was a time where my friends were getting really deep. They were spinning drum and bass, and they were getting really into it. And I would go and I would listen to what they were into, and it sounded like drum and bass and I liked it, but to them it was like, oh, this is two step. Oh, this is this. And I was
Yeah,
like, I could hear the differences, but like there's no way that even like a sub like even something like drum and bass has so many subgenres. So I feel like sometimes you would hear in the 90s there was like kind of a boom because
mhm,
of the parties and stuff. So I feel like I would hear words and I thought they were synonymous, but I think that like they're very specific things. It's like, like I had an example, but I forgot it. But anyway, so go on. So for me, I was more into the drum and bass scene,
okay.
more into the house scene. It was 95 ish to like I still went to when as I got older, but I just didn't like you know get down the same way quite as much. And like out here, the scene is so different, right? So
Yeah,
I was in Miami. You were out here in San Fernando, right?
yeah, it was in, I mean, because the San Fernando is still part of like the LA area. So we would just
Mhm.
kind of go like to the warehouse in downtown LA or just like the surrounding. Or at the time it was San Bernardino where they
Mhm.
were having a lot of like the raves because there was, I remember, if I remember correctly, there was this like abandoned water slide, like a water amusement park that they would have it every once in a while. And I think that was the one, if I'm remembering correctly, I think it was hosted by different like party groups, but the guy that did EDC, he would also host parties there as well.
Uh-huh.
Um, there was like a common area where people would go. Like it was always that place and then NOS event center in San Bernardino as well. They they used to have it and also in LA next to USC. What is that place? Fuck, I'm trying to remember the place. It's next to the African Art Museum.
I don't
Um,
know. I'm not that well versed in
yeah,
big venues of that size.
yeah.
But did you ever get to go to like those parties where it was like what's it called? Where you would just show up to like a random place, people would give you an email address, like where it was like low key cuz I never got to do that in Miami. Was it still happening out here when you were raving?
No, I think I got at the point where they were just passing out flyers left and right. I got introduced to raving culture through my brother's sister.
Mhm.
So like
Wait,
she,
what? So your half sister?
no, not my brother. I mean,
Girlfriend.
through my friend's sister.
Okay, friend sister. Okay.
Sorry,
No, it's okay.
like through my friend's sister. So, and I remember she would like take me to like she kind of went to the big ones, which were like the mainstream ones. But then me and my friends, after we kind of like got hooked and we started going into like the smaller ones that were like being held in like random like warehouses all over LA, and they were just like giving out flyers left and right. So I never got to experience like that, calling a number or getting an email or just like go here, go there. But the funny thing about that now is like I'm here in San Diego and I follow like several like um people who host parties, but they're no longer promoting it the way that they used to because they're like being thrown in like at sewers or like just like renegading like throughout like San Diego. There's like different warehouse parties. So
Mhm.
they're less and less giving out the information. So you have to know who's throwing the party and just kind of get like the info that way.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
no,
Go ahead.
oh, yeah. No, so yeah, no, I was gonna say, so in a way, it's kind of going back to that like 90s ethos of like being secretive of like who gets to know where the party's gonna be. If you know, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's cool. I mean, I think that there. When I've moved out here, I went to a couple parties. There's a space over here. I forget what it's called, but I saw some pretty interesting shows. There's definitely some good music out here. For us, the scene was a little bit different. Because it was in the 90s, but it wasn't out here on the West Coast. So when you say, like, it made me laugh. You said small parties at warehouses. I was like,
Yeah.
this is still a huge space. It wasn't really until I went to like parties in Maryland. Like I went to some parties in Baltimore and in that area. Um, and it's funny to me to just think what the fashion must have been differences must have been like because Jinkos, man, Jinkos up and down, right? Like
Yeah.
in the 2000s, were you guys still rocking those or were those dead by then?
I think Jenkos were dead by then, but candy culture was really big.
Okay, so
Like
like what does that mean?
like you know,
Literally.
like the beats and everything. I mean, it was still. I think I got caught in at the last life cycle of Jenkos and kind of like that like 90s stereotype of like ravers.
Uh-huh.
But it was kind of going more into like more less and less like kind of like flashy clothing. Um,
Yeah, it's funny because I'm just thinking about how much material my pants had.
yeah, I
And not just Jinkos, like Mom and Me's and all these different Liquid Sky, like all these different UFO pants. Did you ever see those? You know what I'm
know.
talking about? Oh, I
I
threw those
think
out
so.
a while ago. But they're like they were these big fucking pants that were baggy and they were like kind of cargo pants, but they were like parachutey and they had these straps and so you would put them on, but you would also like tie the hem. You would like it had a little tie off so you could tie it up on your calf so it would look like you were wearing shorts and there were these like huge baggy puffy
I mean,
it was
I
like the logical conclusion before you guys stopped wearing jinkos.
mean, and that's something like that. Like when I was like raving and I was like thinking of like the 90s, like I was like, I always felt like I missed the 90s because like that era of like raving because I liked the fashion that was happening at that time. By
Yeah.
the time that I got it, it was completely different.
But
Um,
like what do people so you say is you said are when you said less flashy in what sense? Like the
um,
pants are less baggy obviously, but is there's no like people aren't like has it lost that like cuz some of the fun was all the flash, right?
yeah, I mean, it was like a weird kind of like um from what I remember, a lot of the girls were wearing like the tulle, like ballerina kind of things with the fishnets, and like it was always like a bra. Like that
Mhm.
was like kind of like the style that a lot of the girls, like the guys were just wearing regular kind of like clothes. It was just like comfortable and just sometimes like regular shirts. But there were like the candy kids who were like at the last thing where it's like that were still showing flash through like having like those beaded bracelets and like wearing flashy colors. They were still kind of wearing like the Janko pants and whatever, but it wasn't as much as it was like in the 90s. Like it was like kind of
I'm
like
just like I'm imagining it, I'm remembering it, and it's just glorious. It's like all these people you can't see their legs. They're just like moving. It's almost like they're hovering, right, while the while everything is flapping around. It's making me super nostalgic. Um, but that's fun though. Like so did you said you had some notes about history? Did you want to get into a little bit something a little bit more specific?
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I feel like I think one of the things that is like that often gets left behind within like the influence of um, electronic dance music and rave culture is that like the lack of acknowledgement that Black and queer people kind of created the sound that later became part of like the rave culture, like um, kind of thinking about like how the aftermath of disco kind of came like Chicago house and then Detroit house. And that was because all these instruments that were supposed to be like kind of for guitarists, like all these bass like instruments for like professional players, like musician players. And so like all these like it was just like put in secondhand stores, so they were cheap. And then they got their hands on it and they just started producing these things and thinking about like the difference between house in Chicago and then Detroit had techno.
Hmm.
And then just kind of like the evolution of like I'm just like interested in how like how we where we're at now in regards to like electronic music and especially dance electronic music and how it just kind of comes out of the birth after disco. And obviously like disco has other influences before that it's just kind of like growing and it's just kind of like acknowledging the fact that um throughout history techno was created by Black pioneers in Detroit and house music was pioneered by um, Black Americans in Chicago, and it always
I mean,
sometimes
isn't that always the way though?
yeah, always that way, you know?
It's like anything that's good comes from like even our slang. It's so funny, like how you just like a word catches on, and then as an old 40-year-old, you use it, and you're like, and then you find out, like, come to find that it came from some like
Mhm.
community, and by the time it gets to me,
Yeah,
it's been fucked over by like all the little zoomers that are like, oh, this is cool, let's make it our own, you know.
yeah. I mean, it's interesting to think about dance also, like, because I think last year during the protests or whatever, like, Black TikTok kind of like refused to, and I still think they're still doing it now. They're not making dance moves because all these dance moves were created by like Black TikTok creators, and then eventually like all these white people.
Fortnite took them all.
Yeah, and then like all these like white people started doing it, and then like they get credited for a lot of like the dances when it was like someone else with a smaller thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
but it's just always funny thinking about like the evolution of what cool is as well, because it gets so bastardized by like several generations later. Um, because like the
Like, what? Do you have an
original,
example that you're thinking of?
I mean,
That's just an interesting thing you said.
yeah, like I mean, for me, I'm just thinking about like swagger or like what was it like um I'm just thinking about like all the slang that kind of came out like swag came out of like hip hop and then it just kind of like became this thing that got overused and kind of lost its meaning. Also like the word on fleek,
Yeah.
like that was like kind of like a
I
thing to
remember Method Man hated it from the moment it came out, though.
so yeah. I mean, but it's always like interesting to see like how certain words like as soon as they become popular like it just kind of loses like its semblance of its originality or like it's the thing that made it
Do kids still say cool?
I feel like they do. I don't know.
That's such a weird one because that's got such staying power, you know. That's what that makes me think of. Just the idea of like, because yeah, man, groovy and all that bullshit. The bomb from my generation.
Yeah.
My mom gave me a pet talk. I told you I had a rough day, and like I said, I'm already forgotten about it. But my mom gave me a pep talk earlier today, and she goes, "Come on, Javier, you're the bomb." I was just,
Yeah.
it was the cutest thing.
Yeah. I mean, because I kind of
But
remember.
that also came from black culture. It has to have come. No, no white guys is coming up with a metaphor that effective.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just thinking about like all those things and kind of like how with music, it's like there's always that same kind of like, it's always kind of tied together to music. Like
Yeah.
it always like a lot of the time, most of the time, it like bursts out of like music and it just kind of like flows into this own like universe, and it gets taken out of context. And then, as I was saying, like throughout time, people forget like what was the original meaning of it.
Oh my
Um,
god, yeah. With so much today, like I don't even know what anybody means with anything anymore. I constantly have to check in because, like, I think one of the things that's crazy is just how much I don't know what happened to our media cycle, but
mm,
like I don't know. The internet was supposed to be something completely different. You remember, like,
yeah,
and I feel like it's the vibe that we had about the internet was that sort of like raver kind of vibe where it's like, hey, everybody's here, everybody's chill, no one's really a dick, unless you're like a dick or whatever. Like,
yeah,
I mean, they might be like a little closed off and stuff, but that's like, you're out at a party. That's always the case.
yeah, yeah.
but 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 yeah, I think that like there was a lot more idealism. I don't know. Does that still exist? Is it because of the drugs that everybody feels good about the future?
No, it's funny because like I like in regards to like being here doing my MFA, I've been rereading like and TAing classes that deal with like electronic. I've been like rereading like the Cyberpunk Manifesto, and that has sort of like the same like ideology that like early 90s raves kind of have, like the blur and all of that.
Mhm.
And it was like this kind of utopic kind of way of looking at the internet. And I just feel like with social media, after like YouTube, MySpace, and like Facebook came along, it just became like, oh, we could monetize this. It ultimately comes down to capitalism. It's like, and it's like, how can I monetize this kind of like subculture, which always ends up happening? What is it like? Every subculture gets consumed by capitalism.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and
the rave culture's been I think it's almost like raving is passe. It kind of which gives it its sort of coolness again, right? Like,
yeah,
yeah, because there did come a moment where it was kind of reaching peak, and as a kid, there definitely felt some validation, to hear like drum and bass and ads and stuff. Now I'm like a little bit less cool about like ads, but there was a weird moment where like what you were saying was making me think of like it was before the millennium. There was like a deadline coming of like when the future or a number that of a date that was like different in a very profound way, right? It wasn't just like well, it wasn't just a century, it was a millennium, right? And something about that, but that's so crazy even there, like not to get meta on an interesting idea of like of the fact of why we were so hopeful about the internet, but it's like even then that's such a fabricated thing. Like I always find it funny. I don't know, you probably run into this a lot, but the before common era and and after common era or whatever the fuck it is, to me that cracks me up because we're still counting down. Like it's not only we're counting the day still to and from the birth of Christ, right? All we've done is changed like the way we describe it, but it's still like that's the basis for it. But anyway, it's hilarious to me. But the whole point of like it's been 2,000 years since Jesus was born was a big deal, even though we didn't say it like that. But that's essentially what it was, and maybe that speaks to why it didn't end up being a utopia, because we
Yeah,
go
I don't
ahead.
know. It's just like I just feel like with this utopia, like how it's like there's really no utopias because it's hard to achieve. And I'm also thinking about I'm also thinking like what you were saying is like this optimism of the future, and like reading like Mark Fisher and kind of like thinking about like that idea of like his idea of like hauntology is like that we can no longer think about the future, because it's kind of like I'm like trying to remember exactly how he worded and kind of like paraphrase it correctly, but it's just kind of thinking about, because things have gotten so fucked up with society, and we kind of got let down by the evolution of technology, that it's easier to imagine a future without it's easier to not imagine the future that we thought it was going to be. So now that's why we're kind of also nostalgic for things as well. So like, and that's what I see like a lot right now. It's like everyone's kind of like nostalgic for the past, like the like kind of like the rebirth of the early 2000s, and kind of like certain aesthetics of that kind of like coming back to
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
being popular.
Y2K, yeah, yeah. We've
And
talked about Y2K as an aesthetic here before,
yeah,
which is funny to me.
yeah,
But
yeah. I don't know. It's just I think for me like the idea of the future, like I don't like I don't agree with that we can no longer think about the future. I just think that the future has shifted from the original perception that we have, and we have to adapt to a new way to the new way that everything is at the moment with climate change politically and all of that, and just kind of think about it. How do we go from here and think about the future and not kind of like negate what has happened?
yeah, I think it's interesting what the idea of hope. I wonder how much of it has to do with just the impending notion that like we're gonna just destroy the planet in our
Mhm.
lifetimes, and that because that's just been like a ticking clock in my entire life. I remember acting in Earth Day plays where I was like somebody that I played some Brazilian guy that was an activist that stopped uh, deforestation in the Amazon in a school play and stuff like that. And it's so like, I mean, man, that shit is so. It's like it's an existential thing, and right now, I mean, I'm still struggling. I think people are still struggling with COVID. People are still losing their shit. I'm losing my shit, like uh it's I have to remind myself to fucking socialize because it's like it's so easy to just I'm glad that I'm not the only one. Like I literally just before I talked to you, I reached out with people. I'm like, well, I'm stressed out about work. There's really nothing more than I can do about it other than just keep working, and hopefully my work will improve. The only stress is my own abilities, right? Like nobody's stressing me out at work. Nobody's being a dick. It's just my ability, and I'm like, fuck, like I can't just spend all my life like stressing about this.
Yeah.
But did you grow up reading any sci-fi?
No, I actually didn't really get into sci-fi until I moved in with my roommate.
Was
Not
this after
like in
raving?
2015, 2016. I moved in with my roommate. We were doing like our MA at CSUN. Um, and she's the one that really got me into sci-fi more and more. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh. And
To
cause
me,
like,
that's fascinating because they're like almost inextricable. Like I wanted to be like I was a raver because it was like it made me feel futuristic.
yeah, I mean, and I feel like that also kind like I'm also thinking of like that movie Hackers.
Yes, yes,
Uh,
yes, 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 100%.
so like I'm also thinking because like I feel like at least in the 90s, like technology and techno and electronic music were kind of like combined, but that's just my own kind of like glorification of that era, you
Yeah, yeah.
know?
No, they were because it was definitely the Silicon Valley was really boring up until that point, right? Like cuz computers were so inaccessible. That was kind of what made that movie so exciting. I mean, they were fucking playing with DOS. It was these crazy like graphics and stuff like that that have never come to fruition. And when they're like hacking, it's like you see a rabbit chasing an. It's like it's all bullshit, but it's so entertaining, right? But the thing that was but that's a great movie in terms of like '90s raver culture, because it is a movie. It's more about being a raver and being cool in that like aesthetic and like prodigy and magic people, voodoo people, and and like there's even rollerblading in one, in some of it. It's such a quintessential '90s like movie. But yeah, that definitely got us excited for. Did you see it in theaters?
No, I did not see that movie in theaters. I think I saw it on TV at some point. It's like
Nah.
I think it was like on IFC when like I remember getting cable for the first time in like the late 90s and finding IFC and like when they used to show really good independent movies
Hmm.
like that were just kind of man-made, and that's where I saw it and I'm like, oh. And then at the same time that I saw that, I saw like Party Monster and I'm like, I need to go dancing. Where are these parties happening? Because I need to experience this once I get older and could actually do it on my own without like taking a sibling or something like that.
Yeah.
You
So
know?
so Party Monster. That's the one of the guys on Special K. That right?
Yeah. With
Okay.
Michael Alec.
And then I think Macaulay Culkin's in that or no?
Yeah, Macaulay Culkin's
Yeah.
in it, and it's like all about like the '90s club kids in the late '80s,
I
and that's like
remember.
well,
I remember that happening. I remember that being a news story. I remember the thing that happened. So basically, these guys, for people that don't know, it's not a it's a true crime story, so it's not a spoiler for the movie. But basically, these guys they were fucking partying, and I don't know if they killed the guy or the guy just died. But they just kept. What's that?
they killed the guy.
They killed the guy over what? Do you know?
Um, the way that I remember from like the movie is the I forgot Michael Alec that it was played by Macaulay Culkin. They owed him money, and like he's trying to like get them to pay for money because obviously the drug dealer Angel he has he has to pay like who he got the drugs from, so it's like so somehow there's like an altercation and then I forgot how they kill him exactly, but like
But
they
the
did.
the main point about that I find interesting and that I remember from it, I don't necessarily want to tell too much of the movie version of it, but is the that like they basically just kept him in a fucking bathtub and kept doing K for like a while. And I don't know if how comfortable you are talking about your past experiences with drugs, but I've done K. And I could totally see how that would happen.
I mean, I haven't done K. I think like I was more into like ecstasy or Molly, like
Yeah,
instead of like kind of like the more low stakes ones. I don't know. I just wanted to dance more, so I
yeah.
wanted like more.
You called Special K more low stakes.
You want not more low stakes, but I always feel like
I
it's
didn't know
like
you were hard, bro. That's crazy.
I feel like it's more like
It's a psychedelic. It's a weird thing. It's a dissociative, but it kind of treats you like you trip on it in this weird way. That's funny, but yeah. When I thought when you said 24-hour party people, I thought you were talking about the movie sorry, when you said Party Monster, I thought you were talking about 24-hour party people. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Okay, that's a good movie. It's about the origins of the rave scene. I highly
Okay.
recommend it. It's about the Blue Mondays and I forget like who else, some other bands. Oh no, sorry, the Happy Mondays. And
Mhm.
then I think they become New Order after that.
Okay.
But so basically it's the story of this guy and how like it's Steve Coogan. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a really funny actor from England. He's in this movie called The Trip. But anyway, he's in it and he plays like the manager for these bands. And somehow in the story, like, and it's kind of one of those like Ferris Bueller's Day Off narrative devices where he's acting in it, but then he'll stop and explain the history of it, of what's happening, and basically how the rave scene was born. It's fucking great. It's really fun movie. I have it here. That it's one of the ones that that someone got for me because they knew how much I liked raves. But
All
yeah,
right.
it's funny. It's funny how these things like kind of live in your memory. Did you ever watch Go? I think it was called.
Yeah, is that the one where they're driving around San
Yeah,
Francisco? Yeah.
they drive around a
Um,
whole bunch of cities. It's like, yeah, that movie. Anyway, all those like movies, they give my brain like thinking about them just now give my brain like this serotonin release that kind of is like it's like I don't know if you like love playing a sport and then you come home and watch it and it gives you that like warm fuzzies like because I don't know when I was going to parties when I was too young to like I actually got turned away from one and they had to drive me all the way back to my house because they were like fuck
yeah.
it was Ronnie Size Represent was playing, and I fucking missed that show. It was on South Beach, but for us, it was more of the club scene since like Miami was huge with clubs, and I've mentioned this before. We also had like I think that the outdoor raves. There's something about them. When you were talking about the abandoned swimming pool, that sounds like it was probably pretty special because like there's something about I don't know like it has a different vibe. There was this party called Leprechaun Liberation, which was at a go kart racing track that also had an arcade. It was the first place. That was at that party was the first time I heard "Woo Ha" by Busta Rhymes,
Yeah.
and bro, everybody already knew that song. Like I was just late to the game, and they were like everyone was freaking out. And I was like, "What the fuck is this? This is amazing!"
Yeah. It's always interesting thinking about like the songs that you discover while tripping on some sort of drugs and like
Yeah, yeah,
dancing. You're like it just like elevates that experience as well, you know,
yeah.
and especially like I feel like dancing also kind of gets you in that state of trance.
Mhm.
Like, you know, like you're dancing for hours, you're just kind of like focused on the movement and you kind of just forget about everything except for you and how you want to move with the sound that is coming out. And
So,
I always find that beautiful.
yeah, no, that is you're reminding me why I used to do it. Because I just haven't been. It's like I've never been a club party dancer, where you go out and you're like, "Hey, let's grind up against each other," you know. Like I mean, I've done it. But it's a weird dynamic. There's something about when you're dancing in a space where it's like you're just dancing for your own dancing. I don't know. I remember seeing some really good shows. I saw the Orb back when they were doing. They had one of the best light shows I've seen. What? So, are you more in like what? Are you into EDM? Is that more of your genre?
No, I mean, lately, I kind of like
What were you dancing to? And then
I was
we'll go from
dancing
there.
to electro, like
Electro.
yeah, like electro and kind of that style.
That's kind
Um,
of similar to the Detroit techno, right?
yeah, I think it
That's
is. I
like that's what Dr. Dre used to make before
no,
he was a hip hop artist. Yeah, he used to put on I that was part of the beef. Like he what's it called? Ice Cube. You know that song No Vaseline?
no.
It's a diss song from when he left NWA. No Vaseline, obviously. Reference to anal rape. But basically, he released a picture of Dr. Dre in his electro days, and this was back when it was the early '90s, where it was like every gangster rapper had to be tough, and he had a fucking eyeliner and makeup on his on him, so it was like a big fucking deal. But yeah, he used to go make electro and like try to get laid.
Oh, okay.
There's a really great song of his like with like fucking, it's like an electro track with what's it called, like all the creature from Halloween creatures, like Frankenstein is friends with so and so. But yeah, I dig electro. I'm glad. But in 2007, what kind of how, what, was it? Was it a modernized electro, or were they were just it was just a throwback scene?
It was more modernized. I mean, it was like I'm just trying to remember. Like all of them just eventually ended up becoming like the like EDM kind of like people at some
Mhm.
point. Um, like I'm trying to remember who it was. Like we would listen to like Mustard Pimp, Chewy Chocolate Chips, like some weird
You
things
keep
like
naming them. These are so good. DJ
like
Diesel Boy.
some like weird
I
recommend. I'm
forgot
like,
the best part of rave mute culture is the fucking names. That rave that I was telling you about, it was there were also batting cages. I remember dancing in a batting cage, but it was called Leprechaun Liberation.
oh,
I'm guessing
that's
it
a
was in
weird name.
March.
Yeah, like yeah, I can't remember exactly like where they're at now. I think like the one of the big ones I think is damn, I forgot their name. But Mr. Wasso or Mr.
Yeah,
Ozil,
Ozio.
yeah, like he was like one of like that I would like that I would listen to a lot at the same time. But
Didn't
I
he
don't
have
know.
the phone video where it's like a Muppet listening to a phone?
Yeah,
Ba, 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 da, ba. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, I remember Mr. Ozio. That's a little bit of overlap.
yeah.
He was big in Europe, I think,
Hmm.
but I think that's where I saw the video. Or no, maybe it was in DC. But anyway, that doesn't matter.
But yeah, like it was like that kind of thing. It's like, and I'm also really bad at remembering like at that time, like what genre or whatever. I'm like, to me, I was like all new to it. So like for
Mm.
me, like it all sounds the same, but I like what this is sound like. This sounds more like what I want to dance to. Like my friends, I also like my friends kind of hated like drum and bass, like all of that.
I totally understand it. It's one of the hardest musics to fucking dance to.
Yeah.
It's like, but what you do is you don't dance to it like you don't dance to it the 1 2 3 4. You dance to the, 1 2 3 4 5 6. Like you fucking slow it down. You don't have to dance you don't have to dance like this. But it's hilarious to watch people fucking have seizures trying to dance to drum and bass. That was part of what that may have been part of the snootiness of the scene, where it's like, but yeah, I could groove it. It's like, that's the rhythm that you go, and then you dance to that instead of going like,
Yeah, and I think what I met one dancer like when the early days is like, oh, just close your eyes and listen to the beat. That's how you dance to. And I think that was like the best advice I ever got with dancing. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna close my eyes and feel where like the drum or like the thing that I want to focus and dance to, Like if I want to dance to like the bass line or like the guitar or like, like certain sounds, that's what I kind of like learned to dance to in a weird way.
Mhm.
Um, but I feel like I'm going off on a tangent right there.
No, that's all right.
Yeah.
So, what did you ever travel to any other scenes? Did you stay mostly local in this area?
I stayed mostly local because it was like in the 2008, so like the recession and all of that. So it's like
Mm.
we really didn't
Oh,
go.
I forgot that. Yeah, I keep forgetting that 2007 has its own like fucking baggage.
Yeah, so like we never really went elsewhere and just like besides like the LA area.
That's
Um
cool. I was just asking to make conversation because
yeah.
I always find it interesting the different scenes. Um, what I remember distinctly when I was like going to when I was living in Miami when I was doing most of my raving, and then I went up north to like Maryland, and I remember being people being really excited at the idea of our scene because it was still kind of small. And then
Yeah.
I went to their scene and I was like in the DC area. I mentioned it already that the Baltimore area and all those parties that I went to up there were fucking huge and
Yeah.
almost like difficult. Not that I was like the most social person back when I was partying. That's one of the other things that I kind of liked about it is like you could go somewhere, it was really fucking loud, and you weren't necessarily expected to talk to everybody. You could just kind of wander and people watch and then dance, and so like it's not like it was a social scene for me in Miami, but I do remember that when I was there, I was like, "There's no fucking way. This is like impenetrable. These are like huge hallways. It's like warehouse, not just a warehouse, but like clubs that were sizes of like multiple warehouses
Yeah.
and had
Wow.
huge rooms. And I remember being in one of them and just being like, this guy, one DJ just kept train wrecking, and I was like, "Whoa!" Like it doesn't fucking matter when you have this many people. Like they don't care. Like he kept doing it. I would have figured they would have fucking said something to him, you know.
Yeah.
And train wrecking is just when you like crash and burn.
He
But
started hyper pop.
yeah, it was wild. But I remember some good nights on that. And then the whole fun thing is you just stay. What were your after party activities like? Because
Um,
you don't go directly home, do you?
no, I mean, we would usually go and have like breakfast somewhere and then go to like a friend's house and crash and just like kind of sleep it off for a bit and then like go around our days and just kind of like either if you had work the next day you would go to work or whatever you needed to do the next day.
Yeah.
um
But I mean, I'm saying because we used to. Maybe it was we were spoiled because we were in Miami, but we used to have like a ritual. We would go to Lugo Point, and it was this place where you could see the sunrise. That's the other thing. And now I just realized why you guys don't do that out here. Out there, in Miami, you're facing the east, so you don't get sunsets out there. You get sunrises, and that's what's really beautiful. So we would go to parties, and then go see sunrises, and sometimes we would see dolphins and shit.
mhm.
But I just remembered a story that I think will probably be the last one I tell. But what's it called? There was this one party that my friends were spinning at, and it was this regular thing that they were doing at this place called Lemonics.
Mm.
And Lemonics was just this like random fucking big high ceiling place that had all this like light up artwork that people made, out of plexiglass and like, and it was kind of cool stuff. And there were all these chill areas and seating areas and stuff. So these guys would go and they would spin at these parties. They would spin drum and bass, and these fucking 15-year-old kids would show up and they would just get shit faced on Molly. And it was kind of a safe environment, and like I wasn't that much older, so it wasn't like, well, first of all, we were there to like host the party, not to like fucking hit on 16-year-old kids when
Yeah.
I was in my 20s. But like it was the kind of thing where we were like, oh, it's nice that these kids have like a safe place to like fucking do drugs. It was like I couldn't imagine a safer place. But obviously the parents didn't see it that way, so that place got fucking raided, right?
Yeah, I mean it's funny. It's like I always find that funny, like when we're younger, we create like these safe spaces for us, but like the adults in our lives don't see it that way.
Yeah.
They just like, oh, you're just being reckless and just fucking up your life or whatever. But it's like, no, this is like we're all taking care of each other in some weird, like communal way.
Yeah, there's limits to that, but I definitely agree with you. Especially
I mean,
because Molly, I mean, Molly's kind of a dangerous one,
yeah.
like it's as much fun as it is. If my kid was fucking doing Molly every weekend, I wasn't doing Molly every weekend,
Yeah.
like uh, I've done LSD every weekend, and I still think that doing Molly every weekend is gonna fuck you up.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we kind of did. Our friend, like my friend group, we would just kind of like do it every weekend, and it was like this one year where we would just party like every weekend, like try to go somewhere. Um, but like I do get it, like that it could be very addicting. Like if
Yeah.
you're like trying to ru- follow that rush.
Well, I mean I didn't do it a lot just because it would I don't have like the most sunny disposition all the time, just chemically, and so when I would do it I would get fucking brutally depressed
Oh,
like
yeah.
afterwards. But yeah, definitely there's people that have been fucked up by that shit pretty bad because I think it makes holes in your brain, or is that maybe that's an old raver myth.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember hearing that myth too, where it's like, oh yeah, if you do a lot of Molly or ecstasy, you're gonna get holes in your brain.
Let's not spread misinformation. I want to make sure.
No, but I mean, it was just like a funny thing that I'm like,
We'll leave it. We don't have to research it just to make sure. Because, but it is hilarious that you've heard that as well.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, definitely, I've known people that had emotional like problem feeling things after doing too much Molly.
yeah,
So and I've also talked on the show how like it's not necessarily a good thing to eat mushrooms. I said LSD. It was actually mushrooms. Every weekend either. but I can totally understand like I don't know. I also had an awareness of like there while I was there that there's no fucking way that Lemonics is gonna be allowed to operate because it's like there's no fucking way anything like this is gonna last.
yeah.
But I think the people actually that ran the place got in serious fucking trouble because they knew the
Oh,
kids were fucked up.
yeah,
And so I don't know.
yeah. I mean, it's
Hippies
funny.
living the dream.
Yeah, I mean, it's always weird because I feel like that's what's happening now. Like the psychedelics with like mushroom is so big and like younger kids. Like I don't there's not a TikTok that I don't see or like a reference to mushrooms or like to shrooms. And I'm like, it will open your third eye or whatever. I'm like, no, you need therapy. I
Yeah.
mean, but it's just like a weird thing, like how cyclical like drug culture is as well, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that. My mom says that when she was a kid, alcohol was not cool for the kids. Because that was like the square parents things, and like pot and psychedelics were the thing that were like. So if you like, but I don't know how right that is because alcoholism is just fucking perpetual. That's there's a
Yeah,
fucking no force as strong as that. Well,
man.
cool, man. Anything that you wanted that I didn't ask you about? Any final points on the ideas of raving? Anything that you want people to think about?
No, I mean, not really. I feel like we covered like a lot of the points and just kind
Yeah,
of thinking about like the history or just in general. I don't think I missed anything that I wanted to talk
cool.
about.
Is
Yeah.
there anything that you can promote? Your Instagram is TWO88AM.
Yeah, it's let me pull it out because I can
Yeah, I
remember
figured it was.
exactly. It's like the number 288 underscore underscore AM.
Okay,
That's that's my Instagram name. I mean, I don't have anything really to promote besides that. So yeah,
just your academics.
my academic, but that gets boring.
When are you set to graduate?
This is my final year, so I'm in my thesis year.
Are you thinking of staying there, or are you going to be coming back to LA?
Um,
I didn't
I,
realize you went to CSUN. You probably
yeah,
know some. Do you know like Emily and some of those people? Emily Blythe
yeah,
Jones.
yeah. I know Emily Blythe Jones. She was my TA when I was there,
Oh, I
or
guess.
not my TA, but like she was a grad student while I was there.
Mhm.
Um, Also, I know Adrian Sachs. I know if you've had Adrian Sachs
Yeah, yeah.
on the show as well. So, like, at least those are the ones that I know who you had that I know.
Yeah, 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 no, I was just surprised because I didn't know that you went to CSUN. But
Yeah,
now that I'm at Monte Vista, I'm like, I know more people from CSUN than ever before.
yeah. It's a very quiet school, but it has a lot of artists in the LA area.
Well, I really like that everybody at CSUN is supportive of each other, even though it's like a quiet school. It does seem like it's not, it doesn't come as come off the same way that like when Cal Arts people only hang out with Cal Arts people. I
Yeah,
feel like you guys are a lot more open to hanging out with everybody, but I like that you guys support each other as well, you know?
yeah.
Because
I mean,
if you're gonna go to grad school, if you're gonna go to fucking college, you might as well have a community.
that's what like our like a lot of our professors in that program told us. It's like um to be an artist is like to kind of like work as a group with your friends that you kind of like went to grad school and kind of like that, and support each other that way, because the art world is very cutthroat and lonely, and it's good to just like be supportive of each other. And that
I mean that's the only way that I keep my fucking sanity.
yeah.
I live off of the support of even though I have this podcast, there's like I wouldn't show if it wasn't for my friends and all of that. So I'm on board with that. Like yeah, what's it called? I mean, the other alternative is to just fucking help launder money, right? Like
Be an art gallery director.
no, or just be fucking oh my god, can you imagine being oh two Hunter Biden is who I was gonna reference, but
Yeah.
two people that fucking crack me up. Two things that crack me up is that Joe Biden tried to fucking ban the raves in the '90s.
Oh.
I think he did actually, and
Yeah.
that was like a huge thing. So not just Lamonics. I think I was aware that like anywhere there's that much fucking trucks, there's
Yeah.
gonna be some raiding. But yeah. All right, we are at What's My Thesis. I am at Javier Proenza on Instagram and all that other shit. Yeah, thank you for listening to the show. And if you want to rate us and review us, that would be very nice. We're also on YouTube, and we have a Patreon. If you want to help support the show, that would be really nice. Thank you so much. We're at What's My Thesis, or we're What's My Thesis patreon.com. I haven't plugged that in so long because people have been broke. And I felt bad asking. All right. Thank you so much, Victor. It was nice meeting you. And we'll see you guys next week.